I don't remember when the forest first began to feel different. At night, the trees no longer whispered like they used to. They listened. I'd walk the narrow path with my lantern, fog curling at my feet, the cold air thick with silence. Each step echoed too loudly, as though the earth itself was hollow beneath me. Sometimes the lantern light flickered against the branches, and I'd think I saw someone standing just beyond the reach of the glow. Pale outlines, faces where no faces should be. And when I blinked, they were gone. The strange part wasn't the silence, but the sound that broke it. A faint humming, low, constant, carried on the mist, as though the forest itself was breathing through me. I remember the night I followed it deeper, further than I ever should have gone. The trail vanished, the trees closed in, and the humming grew louder until it vibrated inside my chest. That's when I saw it. It was almost dark when I left the main road. The shortcut through the woods always saved me 10 minutes, maybe 15 if I walked fast. The air was colder there. Wet leaves stuck to my shoes. Each step made that quiet sucking sound, like the earth didn't want to let me go. I remember the smell of pine and rain. Old rain that never really dries. A thin fog crept along the path, glowing faintly under the last bit of daylight. I pulled my jacket tighter. It was too quiet. Even the crickets were gone. Then I saw it. A lantern, hanging in the distance between the trees. It swayed gently, like someone was walking with it, slow, steady, unhurried. But I couldn't see a hand. No figure. Just that pale, greenish light moving deeper into the woods. I stopped. Watched it. It stopped too. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Then it swayed again, side to side, like it was waiting. Inviting. I took a step forward. The fog curled around my ankles. It was cold and soft, almost alive. The lantern drifted a little farther ahead. Not much, just enough that I could still see it through the branches. I followed. The path narrowed, roots twisting beneath the soil. The fog thickened until it felt like walking through breath. My breath. Or someone else's. The green light pulsed faintly, as if beating in time with my steps. A strange hum filled the air, low and constant, just beneath hearing. Not quite a sound. More like pressure. Behind my eyes. I thought maybe someone had left it out here. A hiker, maybe. Or a park ranger. But I didn't see footprints. No broken twigs. No sign of anyone at all. Still, I kept following. I don't know why. Curiosity, I guess. It felt like it knew the way out, like it was leading me home. The trees grew tighter around me. Their branches brushed my shoulders, damp and cold. Each time I blinked, the lantern moved a little farther away. Never too far. Always just within reach. The ground sloped downward. Moss glowed faintly under the dim green light. The smell changed. No more pine. Something sour now, like rusted metal and pond water. I realized I couldn't see the sky anymore. Just fog and trees that leaned inward, whispering. When I turned to look behind me, the path was gone. No road, no trail. Only white fog swirling where I'd come from. I froze, tried to listen. Nothing. Not wind, not birds, not even my own heartbeat. The silence was thick, like cotton stuffed in my ears. Then a faint scrape. Somewhere close, metal brushing wood. The lantern flickered. Once, twice, then steadied again, brighter than before. I whispered, "Hello?" But my voice came out small, lost in the fog. The lantern swayed toward me. A slow, deliberate motion. Like it heard me. I took a step back. The hum deepened. It felt like the air was vibrating in my chest. The light was close enough now to see its shape. An old metal frame, rusted and thin. The glass was fogged from the inside, but something moved in it. Something like smoke, or a hand brushing the surface. I could smell it now. Old oil, wet ash, and something sweet, like rotting fruit. My breath came out in small clouds. Each one vanished too fast. I wanted to run, but I couldn't find where to run to. Every direction looked the same: pale mist, black trees, soft earth. The lantern tilted, spilling a faint green glow across the fog. It lit up my shoes. The ground beneath me was wet, darker than mud, shiny, sticky. I took another step back. My heel hit something solid. A root. No, not a root. It was cold, smooth, bone. I stared down. Half buried in the soil was a shape, a hand curled tight, reaching up. Fingers frozen mid-grasp, my throat closed. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The lantern drifted closer, almost level with my face. Through the glass, I saw something flicker. Not a flame. An eye, pale and still, staring back at me. The hum turned into a whisper, a breath against my ear. It said nothing I could understand. Just a long, trembling exhale that seemed to pull the warmth from my skin. The fog rose higher, up to my chest. The lantern began to sink, slowly, as if melting into the mist. I tried to step forward, but the ground wasn't solid anymore. Each step pulled me deeper, softer, until the cold reached my knees. The green light dimmed, flickered. Then, with a faint sigh, it was gone. Only the fog remained. And silence. I stood there for what felt like hours, until the mist thinned, until the world came back. When I finally turned around, I saw the road again. The woods were quiet. No lantern, no hand, no hum, just me, and the faint smell of oil still clinging to my jacket. Sometimes when I walk home at dusk, I catch a glimpse of green light between the trees, and for a moment, I think it's waiting, still leading someone. Still swaying in the fog. It started in late autumn. The air was sharp enough to taste. Everything smelled like wet bark and dying leaves. I used to walk the same trail every evening, just before dark. The forest was quieter then, still, in a way that felt watched. There's an old oak that stands near the creek bend. Its trunk is wide, cracked down the middle like something once split it open. Inside, there's a hollow, just big enough to crawl into. I'd passed it 100 times, never really looked, until one day, I did. The wind was barely moving, but the branches creaked overhead, slow and tired. When I stopped beside the hollow, I felt warmth leaking from it. Not heat, just a soft, damp breath against the cold air. I leaned close, listened. At first, nothing. Just my pulse, steady in my ears. Then, faintly, a whisper. It said my name, not loud, not clear, like someone testing the shape of it through the bark. I thought it was a trick of the wind, but when I whispered back, just to see, the voice answered. A soft hum, almost kind, repeating my name again and again until the sound folded into itself. I stayed there longer than I meant to. The woods dimmed around me. The fog rolled in from the creek, curling around the roots. When I finally pulled away, my face was wet, though it hadn't rained. That night I couldn't sleep. The whisper had followed me somehow. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard it, from somewhere just behind me, saying my name like a secret it didn't want to forget. I told myself I wouldn't go back, but the next evening I did. The hollow looked darker this time, the air heavier, like the forest had been holding its breath waiting for me. When I leaned close again, the whisper was already there. Not one voice now, several, layered and low, tangled together. They said my name, then something else. Too soft to catch, each word like a thread slipping through my mind, pulling me closer. My hands brushed the edge of the bark. It was warm again, pulsing faintly, like skin. When I pressed my ear to it, I could feel movement deep inside. Slow, circular, like something turning beneath the wood. I whispered, "Who are you?" The voices stopped, then laughed, a thin, breathless sound that crawled along my neck. When I stepped back, the forest felt different. Everything leaned closer. Trees, shadows, even the fog. Like they were listening too. After that, I went every night. I don't know why. The voices never scared me at first. They were company, familiar. Sometimes they sounded like my mother, sometimes like myself. They told me things I'd forgotten, small things. Where I'd lost a toy as a child. The name of a friend I hadn't seen in years. They whispered memories like gifts, soft, loving. Until one evening, they changed. It was colder than usual. My breath came out in short clouds, hanging still before fading. The sky was the color of metal. When I reached the oak, I noticed the hollow had widened, just a little, enough that I could see deeper inside. It wasn't empty. There was something behind the wood, something pale, shifting slow. When I leaned closer, I could hear the whispers again, only now, they didn't say my name. They were arguing, muffled, fast, panicked, like a crowd trapped in a single throat. I whispered, "I'm here." Everything went silent, all at once. The kind of silence that hurts, the kind that hums against your bones. Then came the breathing, ragged, wet, too close. It filled the hollow, pressing outward like it might crawl through the gap. Each inhale scraped, slow and broken, like lungs full of water. I stumbled back. Leaves cracked under my feet. The breathing grew louder, desperate, dragging air that didn't belong to it. For a moment I saw something move inside, a shape rising toward the opening, not a person, not an animal, just darkness folding over itself. I couldn't move. I could only listen. The breathing hitched, caught mid-gasp, then stopped. Completely. Silence again. Heavy. Endless. Then, from deep inside the hollow, something whispered, softer than before, almost gentle. "Come in." The bark around the opening creaked, widening. Pieces of wood fell away like teeth breaking. A smell came with it. Damp soil, old water, something sweet and rotten underneath. I stepped back. The fog pressed against my shoulders thick as wool. For a second, I thought I saw eyes in the hollow. Pale, wet, reflecting the last bit of light. Then they blinked, and were gone. I ran, didn't look back. By the time I reached the trail, my lungs burned. The forest had gone completely still. No wind, no branches moving. Just quiet, waiting. I didn't sleep that night either. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard that last whisper again. That voice that wasn't quite mine. The next morning I went back and just to see. The oak was there, but the hollow was gone. The trunk smooth, solid, no opening. No breath, but when I pressed my ear against it, the wood was warm, and deep inside, something whispered my name. It was early November. The air had that smell, cold pine, wet soil, a faint sweetness of burned wood. The kind of quiet where even your breath feels too loud. I'd been walking for hours, following a narrow path that twisted between trees older than any map. The sun was gone. Just a gray light clinging to the edges of the sky. That's when I saw it, a flicker of orange. Far ahead between the trunks. A campfire. The sight felt wrong out here, too far from any trail, too deep into the woods. But I was tired, and that small pulse of light felt like safety. When I reached it, I realized the fire wasn't new. It burned steady, calm. Each flame leaned in the same direction, like it was waiting for something to return. No one was there. 3 sleeping bags lay side by side, perfectly zipped. A kettle rested near the coals, still steaming faintly. 2 tin plates sat on a log, half-eaten food still warm. Beans, I think, and bread. I remember how the air moved, soft, like a slow inhale before a word. The fire crackled, small pops breaking the silence. But beyond it, nothing. No footsteps, no wind. Even the trees were still. At first I thought whoever had been here had just stepped away. Maybe collecting wood, maybe at the creek. But the ground told another story. Footprints, everywhere. Dozens of them, hundreds, pressed deep into the soft dirt, circling the fire over and over. Some large, some small. Bare feet mostly, a few with shoes. All of them tangled together, looping around the same patch of ground until the soil had no shape left. I knelt closer. The prints were fresh, edges still sharp, but there were no trails leading away. No beginning, no end. Just circles. The longer I stared, the more the air seemed to hum, a faint vibration beneath the quiet. Like the woods were holding their breath with me, I whispered. Hello? Though I didn't know who I meant to find, the word felt too loud. It hung in the fog and didn't come back. The fire popped again. A coal jumped, landing near my shoe. I kicked it away, but it didn't dim. It rolled, glowing like an eye. That's when I noticed the shadows. There were too many. The fire cast them long across the ground, thin, stretched shapes that didn't match the tents or the logs. Some bent at strange angles. Others curved around the sleeping bags like they were standing over them. I blinked. The shadows didn't move. Not even when the flames shifted, I wanted to leave. But the forest around the camp looked deeper somehow. Every path I turned toward felt like it folded in on itself. The fog had thickened, too. Faint trails of white curling through the air like breath. The fire was the only thing that looked alive. It burned too clean, too still. I crouched beside the nearest sleeping bag. The fabric was cold, untouched, but underneath it, the ground was warm, my throat tightened. I lifted the edge of the second bag. Same thing. No one there, just heat, like someone had been lying there seconds before I arrived. I could smell smoke now. Sharp, dry, almost metallic. It clung to my clothes, to my skin. The footprints seemed to move in the flickering light. Only slightly. Like the dirt itself was breathing, I stepped back. The humming grew louder, not sound exactly, but pressure. Like a slow heartbeat coming from the center of the campfire. The flames began to lean toward me. Not with wind, with purpose. For a moment, I thought I saw something inside them. Shapes, figures walking in circles, just like the prints below. Their outlines flickering with each flame, there, then gone, then there again. Each time they appeared, the ground seemed to pulse beneath my feet, a rhythm too slow to be natural, too steady to be random, and then everything stopped. The fire froze. Flames caught mid-flicker, bending sideways like painted glass. The crackling went silent. The smoke hung motionless in the air. Even my breath stopped showing in the cold. I didn't move. Couldn't. The world around me had gone still. Every leaf, every ember. It felt like I had stepped into a photograph. Then, from behind me, a soft exhale. Not mine. It brushed against my neck, warm and slow. And when I turned, there was no one, only the circle of footprints. And the fire, still frozen, yet burning. I took a step back, and the prints seemed to shift again, filling with dark water, glistening. I blinked, and the fire snapped back to life, crackling, normal, as if nothing had happened. The warmth hit my face. The humming was gone, but the sleeping bags were zipped again, tighter this time, flattened like something had climbed inside while I looked away. I left. Didn't run. Just walked until the trees thinned and the air felt like air again. When I glanced back through the fog, the fire was still burning, exactly the same, unmoving, like it had never gone out. And sometimes, on windless nights, I still smell smoke in the woods, faint, dry, and sweet, like something waiting for me to come back. It was early morning, the kind of dawn that feels half asleep, quiet, colorless, barely breathing. The world was still gray when I woke. Cold air clung to the window glass. Somewhere in the distance, I heard water. A steady rushing sound, flowing, moving, alive. But there shouldn't have been water here, not for miles. No river, no stream, just forest and frozen ground. Still, the sound was clear. It came from beyond the trees, winding through the fog. I followed it. The forest was wet with dew. Branches hung low, dripping softly. Each step pressed against the damp earth with a muted crunch. As I walked, the sound grew louder, more insistent. It echoed through the air like it had always been there, like I'd simply never noticed. Then, through the pale mist, I saw her, a woman, standing in the center of what looked like a river that hadn't existed yesterday. The water was dark, almost black, moving fast around her ankles. But she didn't move, didn't even sway. Her dress was white, too white for the color of dawn. The fabric floated just above the surface, rippling softly with the current. Her hair hung long and tangled, dripping with cold light. I stopped at the edge of the bank. There was no path to her, no bridge. Just the water and that still, silent figure. She faced the other way at first. Head tilted slightly as if listening. I should have turned back. But the sound of the river, it was strange, deep, layered, almost like whispering, like words just out of reach. When I blinked, she turned. Slow, deliberate. Her face pale, too pale. Skin without warmth, without blood. Her eyes caught the faint light. They didn't reflect it. They absorbed it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The fog drifted between us, curling like thin smoke. I felt the air grow heavier, thicker, each breath shallow and cold. The river rushed louder now, though her feet never shifted. The current twisted around her, dark and fast, but she stood still, like the water was flowing through her, not around. Then I blinked again. She was closer. Half the distance between us was gone. No sound, no movement, just there, nearer. The water still roaring behind her, my throat went dry. I took a step back. The air behind me didn't feel real anymore. Too still, too close. I looked down at the ground beneath my boots. Dry, no river. The sound was gone. When I looked up again, she was standing on the forest floor. Only a few steps away, the white dress hung heavy now, soaked and dripping. Each drop hit the ground like a heartbeat. Slow, measured. Her hair clung to her neck and shoulders, strands stuck to her face, and she was breathing, slowly, too slow. Each inhale made the wet fabric shift against her ribs. Each exhale sent a faint mist curling from her mouth. I wanted to speak, ask who she was, ask where the river had gone, but my voice wouldn't come. My jaw moved, but no sound followed. Her eyes found mine, empty, like looking into water that has no bottom. A drop fell from her chin, clear, but when it touched the ground, it spread dark. Like ink, like something alive, she took a step forward. No sound, no footprints. Her dress brushed the ground and the fog seemed to follow, sliding toward me. It reached my shoes, cold, soaking through the fabric. I tried to back away again, but my legs felt wrong, heavy, rooted. She stopped just an arm's length away. The smell of damp earth and old rain filled my nose. Her breath, I could feel it out shallow, uneven. Then, for the first time, she moved her lips. They didn't form words, just shapes. Silent. But the meaning pressed into my chest anyway. Like something whispered directly into my bones. A memory I didn't recognize. A promise I never made. The world seemed to tilt. The fog thickened until the trees vanished behind her. Only her face, her eyes, the wet fabric clinging to her body remained. Then, she blinked and was gone. The ground was dry again, the air still. Only the faint scent of river water lingered, cold and sharp. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting for the sound of the river to return. It never did, but every dawn since then. Just as the sky turns pale, I wake to the sound of rushing water. Faint, close, like it's moving somewhere under the floorboards. And sometimes, if I listen long enough, I can hear her breathing too. It was late afternoon, the kind of quiet that comes before rain. The air smelled like wet bark and something metallic underneath. I took the trail home through the woods, the same one I'd walked 100 times. The light between the trees was soft, green, calm. It should have felt safe. Somewhere behind the clouds, the sun was setting. I could feel it more than see it, a slow dimming, like someone turning down the world. The ground was damp, packed tight from last night's storm. My footsteps sank, muffled, soft. A few birds still called in the distance. Everything else had gone still. Then I saw it, a moss-covered stump, half-rotted, sitting right beside the path. Familiar. I'd passed it before, maybe half an hour earlier. I slowed down, looked around. The trees all leaned the same way, roots twisting through the mud. It looked the same. But everything does out here. I told myself I must have just looped back by mistake. I turned right at the next fork, then left. I watched for landmarks, a fallen branch, a patch of ferns, the bend of a tree. After maybe 20 minutes, there it was again. The same stump. Same shape of moss curling over the edge like a frozen wave. Same faint cut in the bark. Even the same little red mushroom growing near the base. I felt a small ache in my chest. Like the air had thinned a little. I tried again. Different turns, longer strides. I even broke into a jog for a while. But every time I came back to that same spot, the world looked dimmer. The light thicker. The shadows stretched farther across the dirt. I knelt by the stump once, pressed my hand to the moss. It was damp and cold, like touching skin underwater. A faint hum lingered in the air just beneath the silence. Not loud, just enough to notice once you couldn't ignore it anymore. I started to count my steps. 100 forward, 50 left, another 100 straight. But the numbers didn't help. The stump was waiting for me again. And again. The forest didn't shift in big ways. It was small things, the air heavier, the smell of rot sharper. The fog beginning to curl low between the trunks. I tried calling out once. Just to break the quiet, my voice didn't carry far. It fell flat, swallowed by the trees. I checked my phone. No signal. The time was wrong, too. Stuck at 6:47. Even when I checked again, that's when I started to notice the footsteps. Not loud. Just faint enough that I could almost convince myself they were mine. But they came half a second too late. Following, not matching. I turned. Nothing. Only the path and the pale mist behind me. I waited, held my breath. The air hummed again. That same quiet vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then, one soft step. Behind me, close. I spun around. The path was empty. But the dirt near the stump looked disturbed. Fresh prints beside my own, half faded by the moisture. Bare feet, small, not mine. My hands started to shake. I told myself it could have been anything, a trick of light, a memory in the soil. But the prints were new, and they led in the same endless circle I'd been walking. The fog grew thicker. It clung to my arms, cool and wet. When I exhaled, the mist didn't move. It stayed still, like the forest was holding its breath with me. I began to walk faster. Didn't matter where. Just away. Every turn looked the same now. Every tree leaned the same way. Even the sounds of my footsteps felt hollow, as if the ground had no depth beneath it. After what felt like hours, I came upon the stump again. Only now, something was different. A single handprint pressed into the moss. Smaller than mine. Fresh. Still glistening like it had just been there. The hum had changed too. Slower now. More like breathing. A steady rhythm that filled the space between each of my own breaths. I whispered, "Who's there?" But the words came out broken. My throat too dry. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. Then I heard it. The faint rustle of footsteps. Not one pair. Two. One matched mine. The other followed. I stopped walking. The other steps stopped too. I turned slowly. Through the fog, the trees shifted like shadows moving underwater. For a second, I thought I saw someone. A figure standing just beyond the mist, still, facing me. Then the fog folded again, and it was gone. The humming turned to static, soft, pulsing through the air, crawling under my skin. It filled my ears, my chest, my thoughts. I ran. Didn't matter which way. Branches clawed at my sleeves, roots snagged my feet. But the sound followed, a second rhythm matching my pace. When I finally stumbled to a stop, gasping for air, I knew before I looked. The stump was waiting. Same moss. Same red mushroom. Only now there were two sets of footprints beside it. Perfectly side by side, the static faded. The forest was quiet again. Completely still. I tried to leave once more, but my body wouldn't move. My breath came shallow. Slow. In the reflection of the damp bark, I thought I saw movement. Someone standing just behind me. Close enough to touch. I didn't turn around. The air was too heavy. The light too thin, and somewhere in that looping silence I realized I wasn't walking the path anymore. The path was walking me. It was late. Maybe close to midnight. The kind of cold where breath turns heavy, hanging between the trees before it fades. The forest behind my cabin stretched for miles. I'd walked it a few times during the day. But at night it felt different. The paths didn't look the same. Even the air moved slower. I took my old radio with me, a small battered thing that ran on weak batteries. Sometimes I'd catch local stations through the static. Faint voices, faraway songs. It made the quiet less heavy. The moon was thin that night, hidden behind clouds. Only the flashlight beam ahead of me cut through the dark. It glowed pale against the trunks, soft against the drifting mist. For a while it was silent. Just wind and the soft crunch of leaves under my boots. Then the radio hissed, a sudden burst of static. Sharp, alive. I froze, held the radio up. The noise came and went. A rough pulse, fading in and out like it was breathing. I turned the dial slowly. The static cracked again. Then something flickered underneath. Faint music. Soft, old, almost sweet. A lullaby, the kind my mother used to hum when I was small. The notes were warped, stretched by the distance, but I recognized the rhythm. It was like someone was playing it from another room, just beyond the trees. I walked a little farther. The pines grew taller, thinner, their tops swaying in the dark. The air smelled like cold sap and iron. The radio hummed again, louder this time. The music still played, but beneath it something else started to form. A whisper between the cracks of static. I turned the volume up. It almost sounded like words. Broken, distorted. Fading in, then gone again. Then it came through, my name, whispered once. Then again. Slow, dragged through the static. My throat tightened. The forest felt smaller. Even the wind stopped. I thought it could have been interference. Some stray signal. An echo from a frequency nearby. But the closer I walked toward the grove of pines, the clearer it became. My name. Soft. Over and over. The voice didn't sound electronic. It was too human. Too close. I stopped near the edge of the grove. The trees grew dense here, packed together like they were hiding something between them. The flashlight's beam barely reached past the first row of trunks. The radio was warm in my hand now. The metal casing buzzed faintly, like it was reacting to the air, then silence. Everything cut off at once. No static, no wind, just the stillness pressing down on me. I tapped the radio. It clicked back to life, and the lullaby started again, slower this time, almost dragging. Each note stretched too long, trembling, and beneath it, the whisper, closer now. Almost inside the speaker, my name, but not said, breathed. The trees ahead shifted slightly. Something brushed against the bark, slow, deliberate. A shape moving between the trunks, too tall, too thin. I stepped back, heart pounding, but the radio grew louder. The static surged, climbing into a sharp whine. It hurt to listen, but I couldn't turn it off. I looked down at the speaker. The dial moved on its own. The needle twitching back and forth like something was trying to tune in, then it locked. And the voice came through clear, right behind me. I turned, fast. Nothing. Only fog curling around the path, pale and cold. But I could feel it. Breathing. The air brushing against the back of my neck, slow and steady. The lullaby played again. but the melody had changed. No longer soft, it wavered, the notes wrong, melting into static that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I started walking backward, not daring to look away from the grove. The trees seemed to close in, each step echoing against the stillness. Then the voice said it again. My name, not from the radio this time, from the woods, whispered low. Almost kind. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. The dark swallowed everything. The radio glowed faintly in my hands, the red tuning light the only thing left. Through the static, I heard the lullaby fade one last time, replaced by something quieter, breathing, perfectly in sync with my own. I ran. Branches scraped my arms, the air slicing cold against my face. But even as I moved, the static followed, not behind me, but around me, as if the whole forest was alive with it. Every few seconds, my name would slip through again. Always calm, always closer. By the time I reached the clearing, the sound began to fade. The static thinned. The voice disappeared. Only the faint hum remained, vibrating through the night. I looked back. The pines stood still, tall and unmoving, black against the faint light of the sky. Everything seemed quiet again. The radio went dead in my hand. No hiss, no glow. Just a heavy silence that felt like it had been waiting for me to stop listening. I don't go near that grove anymore. But sometimes, when the wind cuts through the trees behind my cabin, I think I can hear it again. Not the lullaby. Not the static. Just a breath, whispering my name, from somewhere deep in the pines. It was late afternoon when the light began to fade. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the air felt still, heavy between the trees. I was walking along the narrow path that cut through the clearing, the one that always looked golden at dusk. But that evening, it didn't. The sun didn't touch the ground. The colors were muted, gray. Every step seemed to sink deeper into silence. I stopped near the edge of the clearing. Something felt wrong. Like I wasn't supposed to be there, and that's when I saw him. He stood across the clearing. Tall, thin, motionless. His clothes were dark, the edges soft, like the fog was swallowing him. For a moment, I thought he was just a shadow, a trick of the light, but then I noticed his face, or rather, the absence of one. Smooth, flat, like skin stretched over nothing. No eyes, no mouth, just pale skin where features should have been. He wasn't moving, but somehow I knew he was looking at me. My throat went dry. I couldn't tell if I was breathing. The forest around us seemed to lean in, waiting. I took a step back. Leaves crunched under my boots, and his head tilted slightly, slow, deliberate, as if he heard it. I turned to go, but the trees weren't the same. The path that should have led home was gone. Every trunk looked identical, tall, narrow, crowding closer together. The clearing behind me glowed faintly. When I looked back, he was still there, but closer. The distance between us had halved, though I hadn't heard him move. No footsteps, no breath, just stillness. The pale of his skin seemed brighter now, almost glowing against the dusk, like he didn't belong to the same light as everything else. I started walking faster, pushing through the trees, trying to find a break in the pattern. But each time I turned, the clearing reappeared. Always the same stump, the same gray light, the same figure standing at the edge. My heartbeat felt too loud. My hands shook. I whispered to myself, "You're not lost, you're not lost." But the words didn't sound right. They didn't sound like mine. I stopped again just to listen. The forest breathed slow around me, soft rustles, branches shifting in wind that didn't exist. And beneath it, something faint. A hum, low, constant, like it was coming from the earth itself. When I looked up, he was there, closer than before. Standing between two pines, his head tilted again like he was curious. I could see the folds in his clothing now, the slight movement where breath should have been. But there was no breath, no rise, no fall. I took another step back and felt bark against my shoulders. The tree behind me, only the surface wasn't rough, it was smooth, like skin. I jerked forward, heart pounding, and turned toward the clearing. He was gone, just the fog now, thin streaks of light threading between the trees. For a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it, the figure, the face, all of it. Then I saw the footprints. Not mine. long, narrow impressions circling the clearing, too many to count. Pressed deep into the soft ground, looping endlessly, all leading nowhere. The hum grew louder. A pulse, like static under the soil. I tried running again, but no matter which way I turned, the forest folded in on itself. Each direction curved me back toward the same space, and then something brushed against my arm. Cold, damp. I spun around. Nothing. But when I faced the clearing again, he was there. Right at the center now. A few feet away, no movement, no sound. Just that pale, blank face turned toward me. I wanted to scream, but my chest wouldn't move. It was like the air itself had thickened, pressing down on me. He stepped closer. One slow stride. Then another. Every tree around us seemed to bend inward, their trunks stretching, pointing toward him. The clearing darkened, the light folding away like it was afraid. He stopped just a breath away. Close enough for me to see the faint outline of where a mouth should have been. A shallow curve beneath the skin, and in the silence between us I heard something. Not out loud. Inside my head, a whisper. Low, cold. It wasn't a word, just intention. Like he wanted me to look, so I did. For the smallest moment, the smooth surface of his face moved. Not a smile, not expression, just a ripple, like something alive was shifting beneath. The next thing I remember is running. Branches clawing at me, fog breaking against my face until the forest opened into pale dawn. When I finally turned around, the trees stood still again. No clearing, no hum, just the echo of breath that wasn't mine. I don't go near those woods anymore. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I see him, standing just beyond the dark, still waiting, still watching. Without a face, I've lived near these woods my whole life. Every trail, every turn, I know them by heart. But that night, the forest didn't feel familiar. It was colder than usual. The kind of cold that sticks to your skin, makes your breath drift in uneven clouds. The moon was thin, silver, cutting between the trees like a blade. I'd gone farther than I meant to. Too far past the ridge where the trees grow closer and the ground turns soft. The air there always feels heavier, quieter. That's when I saw it, a glow between the trunks. Soft, golden, like firelight. I thought maybe someone had built a campfire out there. But as I got closer, I saw the shape of it. A cabin, small, crooked, sitting in a clearing I'd never seen before. I stopped at the tree line. The windows were glowing, warm, steady light flickering against the glass. For a moment it felt comforting, human, but something in me didn't move. That clearing shouldn't exist. I've walked this forest since I was a kid. There's no cabin here, still. I stepped closer. The light shimmered faintly through the fog, making the wood look alive. Moss crept up the walls and the roof sagged inward, heavy with rot. But the windows were so clean, warm air brushed my face as I neared the porch. It smelled faintly of smoke and something sweet, like burned pine and old fruit. I raised a hand to knock. The wood beneath my knuckles was damp, soft. Before I could touch it, the door opened, slowly, without a sound. The warm light spilled out, pooling across the ground. I waited, half expecting someone to appear in the doorway. No one did. Inside, it looked empty. Dust floated in the air, thick enough to catch in my throat. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, heavy and silver in the light. I stepped over the threshold. The floorboards creaked beneath my boots, the sound sharp against the stillness. It smelled like damp wood and rust, old, forgotten. But the light, it was steady. A single oil lamp sitting on a table near the far wall. Its flame didn't flicker even though I'd left the door open. I moved closer, trying to understand. Every surface was covered in dust, except for one thing: footprints, faint, dark shapes pressed into the layer of dirt. Bare feet, starting near the door, crossing the room, circling the table, then disappearing into the shadows near the back wall. I stared at them, my heart crawling into my throat. The prints looked fresh. The edges were sharp, not blurred. Whoever made them had been here moments ago. I whispered something, I don't remember what. My voice didn't sound right. It didn't belong to the silence. The cabin felt smaller now. The walls seemed to lean in, the air thick with something unseen. I could feel it, watching. I turned toward the door, but it had closed. The latch clicked softly, like it had locked itself. I took a step forward, but the boards groaned beneath me, echoing too loud, too long. Each sound stretched into the next until it didn't sound like wood anymore. It sounded like breathing. I froze. The air shifted behind me. Cool. Close. I didn't look back right away. My chest was tight, each breath shallow, measured. The lamp still glowed, but its flame had dimmed, the light sinking lower, as if something was standing between it and me. When I finally turned, nothing was there. Just the back wall. Rotting wood, and the faint outline of a door I hadn't noticed before. It was small, almost hidden behind the hanging cobwebs. I should have left. Every part of me told me to leave. But I reached for it anyway. The handle was cold metal, slick with moisture. When I pushed it open, I expected another room. But it led outside. The air hit me all at once, sharp, freezing, full of pine and fog. Only it wasn't the same forest. The trees were wrong. The clearing stretched too far, the ground smooth and untouched, like no one had ever walked there before. And the cabin behind me, the light inside was gone. I turned to look back at it. Every window was dark. The wood looked older now, more decayed, like it had been sitting there for decades. No footprints. No sign of the door I'd come through. Only silence. I don't remember walking home. Only the sound of my own breath, shallow and fast, and the feeling that something was following just out of sight. When I reached the edge of the forest, I looked back one last time. The trees swayed gently in the wind. Nothing else. But sometimes, on clear nights, I see it again. A faint light deep between the trees, warm, golden, always the same cabin, always where it shouldn't be, and I know, if I ever step toward it again, the door will already be open. It was late. Past midnight, maybe. The kind of hour where sound travels too far, and even breathing feels too loud. I was walking home through the woods. The air was heavy and soaked with mist. Every branch dripped softly. Every step sank into the damp earth. The fog was so thick it swallowed the path. My flashlight barely reached my own feet. Just a circle of pale light, floating in gray. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, like a secret shared between children. I stopped walking. The sound was faint, high-pitched, playful. It echoed somewhere ahead of me, but the woods beyond were empty. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. Not this far from town, not this late. I stood still, listening. The fog pressed close, cool against my skin. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. A giggle, then two more, overlapping like ripples in water. It came from deeper in the forest, past the old fence line where the ground turns soft and the trees grow too close together. I told myself it was just the wind. Maybe water moving through the ravine, but my body didn't believe it. I felt my heart thudding, slow and hollow, still. I started walking. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself was pulling me back. The laughter kept drifting ahead of me, just out of reach. Bright, happy, wrong. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The fog thickened until it glowed faintly with my light, a pale white wall around me. Every direction looked the same. And then for a moment, the laughter stopped. Silence. Just my breath. And the faint hum of the forest, like something waiting to speak again. I turned in a slow circle. The trees were shapes now, tall shadows fading into the mist. No sign of movement. No footprints, but my own. Then, a burst of giggling right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The fog curled where I'd just been standing, as if something had moved through it. My throat felt dry. The air had a strange taste, metallic like wet coins. I should have turned back. But I didn't. The laughter began again. Higher this time. Lighter, like it was coming from above me. I tilted my flashlight upward. Branches, dripping leaves, gray shapes swaying slowly. No wind. Still the branches moved. Just slightly. Enough to make the mist shift and scatter. The laughter came again from up there, above the trees. It wasn't echoing. It was falling. Each laugh seemed to drip down through the fog like rain. Closer each time, until it felt like they were whispering right beside my ear. I froze. My breath turned to steam. I couldn't tell if the sound was in front of me or inside my head. One soft giggle, so close I felt it in my chest. I aimed my light higher, up toward the canopy, and the beam caught something. Movement. Pale shapes among the branches. Not birds, not animals. Small, dangling. Still, for a second, I thought I saw faces. Round, smooth, eyes too open. Then they swayed, and the fog swallowed them again. The laughter stopped all at once. Every drop of sound gone. The forest was still. Even the drip of water from the branches had gone quiet. Only the static hum of silence remained. I took a step back. Then another. The ground beneath me felt soft. Too soft. When I looked down, my boot sank into something wet. A small, half-buried shoe. Tiny. Red. The fabric soaked through. I left it there. I didn't run. I just walked. Slowly. Carefully. Until the fog thinned enough for me to see the sky again. When I reached the main road, the air was clear. The moon hung low, cold and white. Behind me, the forest was still. But just before I turned away, I thought I heard it again. Far off this time. That same laughter, faint, floating through the fog. Rising, not falling. I don't go through those woods anymore. Not when it's misty. Not when the air feels too heavy to breathe, because I learned something that night. That some sounds aren't meant to be followed. And sometimes when children laugh in the fog, it's because they never left it. It started at dusk. The light was thinning, that soft gray hour where everything feels quieter than it should. I was walking home across the field, and that's when I saw it. A figure. Standing high on the ridge. Still. Too still. The ridge isn't far. Maybe half a mile from my house. Bare earth. A few pines at the top, and a fence that hasn't stood straight in years. But that evening, there was someone there. They didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't even seem to breathe. I thought maybe it was a neighbor. Someone out late watching the sunset. But as the light dimmed, the figure didn't turn away. It just stayed. Facing me, the air was cool. Grass brushed my knees as I walked. A faint hum drifted from the insects, but it felt muffled. Like the sound was being absorbed into the earth. I couldn't tell if the figure was looking down at me or through me. By the time I reached my porch, the sun had fallen behind the ridge. The figure was still there, a black cutout against the fading sky. I watched for a while. Minutes stretched into an hour. The stars began to appear. Still it didn't move. Eventually I went inside. But I couldn't stop glancing out the window. Every time I looked, it was there. Even when the night turned completely black, I could see its outline, a darker shadow against the hill. I told myself I was imagining it, that my eyes were playing tricks on me, that if I checked again in the morning, the ridge would be empty. But in the morning, the figure was gone, and that should have been the end. Except that night, it came back. Same place. Same stillness. Watching, I tried ignoring it. Tried not to look. But each night as the sun went down, I'd feel the same pull, the same need to check, and every time there it was. Exactly where it shouldn't be. One evening I walked toward it. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to make it ordinary. The ground sloped up slowly, the dry weeds whispering around my legs. As I climbed, the figure didn't move. Not a step. Not a breath. I kept going, closer and closer, but the ridge never seemed to come nearer. No matter how long I walked, the distance between us stayed the same. It was like the land was folding itself, keeping me away. By the time I realized how dark it had gotten, the figure had vanished. The ridge was empty again. I turned back toward my house and froze. It was there, now standing at the edge of my field, closer than before. Still facing me, I couldn't move. Every part of me felt heavy, like if I blinked, it would be right in front of me. Then a cloud shifted across the moon, and in that brief, silvery light, I saw it clearly for the first time. Tall. Too tall. Its arms hung wrong, longer than they should have been, and where its face should have been, Just shadow, no eyes, no mouth, nothing. It didn't move. Didn't chase. It just stood there, watching. I backed away slowly until the porch steps creaked under my weight. When I looked again, it was gone. For days after, I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that maybe I'd seen fog or a trick of light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Even inside my house, especially at night, weeks passed. The ridge stayed empty. Until tonight, I noticed it again, just as the sun dipped low. Same place, same posture, but this time, something was different. The air was still. No wind, no insects. No sound at all, and then the figure moved, slowly, deliberately. It raised one arm and waved, not fast, not frantic, just a single heavy motion, like it knew I was watching back. My chest tightened. My skin prickled. I didn't wave. I couldn't. I turned away, closed the curtains, and sat in the dark for a long time. Even now, as I whisper this, I can feel it. Through the walls, through the quiet. The weight of its gaze pressing against my house, and I know that if I open the window, if I dare to look toward the ridge again, it'll be closer, waiting, still waving. It was early morning. The air still held the damp chill of the night. Mist drifted low across the forest floor, soft as breath. I'd been following a narrow path between the pines, one I'd walked 100 times before. But that day it felt different, heavier somehow. Something in the earth caught my eye. A small mound of mossy stones piled in a strange, deliberate way. Not natural, not random. The ground around them was sunken slightly, as if something beneath had tried to rise. I knelt down, brushed the moss away. The stones were cold, slick with dew. I don't know why I started to move them. Curiosity, maybe, or something quieter, pulling at me from underneath. One by one, I lifted them aside. The smell of wet soil rose up, earthy, sweet, like rain that never stopped. Beneath the last stone, I saw a corner of leather, an old book, half rotted, edges swollen from years underground. I pulled it free. The cover was dark, cracked like old skin. It left a stain on my fingers. When I opened it, the pages clung together, soft and pulpy. Faded handwriting crawled across each line, uneven, hurried, almost desperate. I sat there in the dirt, turning the pages carefully, and began to read. The entries spoke of the forest, of wandering, of losing direction beneath the same pines I knew so well. The writer mentioned hearing whispers at night, described how the trees seemed to move when they weren't looking. They wrote about footprints that appeared beside their own. Though they'd been walking alone, the handwriting grew shakier with each page. Blots of ink, smudges. At one point, a line simply read, "I think the forest is copying me." A slow shiver traced my spine. I could feel the stillness of the woods pressing in around me, as if listening. I turned another page. Then another. Each entry matched something I knew. A bend in the creek, a hollow tree. Even the fallen oak I passed on my way here, it was like someone else had walked this same path, step for step, long before me. But the last pages, they were different. The writing became hurried, letters uneven, sentences broken mid-thought. The words described the sound of something moving through the fog, a voice calling their name. They said they buried the journal here, so someone will know I existed. I kept reading, but then my breath caught. The final entry wasn't smudged or faded. The ink looked newer, still dark. The date, it was tomorrow. I froze. My hand hovered over the page. Tomorrow. But that couldn't be. The journal was old, soaked through with time. It couldn't have been written yesterday, or tomorrow. Yet there it was, clear and sharp. Tomorrow I hear them again. Tomorrow, I see the one that walks behind me. Tomorrow, I am not alone. The forest around me felt colder. A soft wind moved through the branches, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. A whisper, almost human. I closed the book, pressed it against my chest. For a moment, I thought I heard footsteps, light, measured, circling. The pages trembled in my hands. I didn't dare look up. I just listened. The air thickened, filled with a low hum like distant voices blending together. When I finally looked, the forest was empty. Still. But I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I put the journal back where I found it. Layer by layer, I covered it again with the stones. My hands shook, but I didn't stop until every trace was gone. Even as I stood, I felt it. A presence, close enough to touch. I walked home without turning back. Every step sounded too loud, too hollow. By the time I reached my door, the sun had already fallen behind the trees. The forest looked the same as always. Calm. Familiar. But I can't stop thinking about that date. About the way the ink hadn't faded. About the words that felt like they were meant for me. I left the journal buried, but I can still feel it. Somewhere under the moss, beneath the weight of stone, it's waiting. And tonight, as the wind moves through the pines, I swear I can hear it again. Soft pages turning, a pen scratching, writing something new. Maybe another entry. Maybe my name. Maybe tomorrow. It won't just be the forest that's watching. It started in early winter, when the air grew thin and the ground cracked under frost. Each evening, as the light sank behind the ridge, I'd see it, a single deer, standing at the tree line, still as stone. Its fur was dark, its breath slow, its eyes fixed on my cabin. At first I thought it was curiosity. Animals wandered close sometimes. The forest was alive, even when it seemed empty. But this one never moved, never grazed, never turned its head, just watched, night after night. I'd catch a glimpse of its outline between the branches and feel something tighten in my chest. Once, I stepped outside. The snow muffled my footsteps, each one a soft crack beneath the silence. The deer didn't run. It didn't even flinch. It just stood there, as if waiting for me to come closer. I stopped halfway. The air was so still, I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Its eyes caught the moonlight, black, wet, and endless. I turned back inside, closed the door, but that image stayed. Those eyes like holes cut into the night. Days passed. I stopped going near the windows after dark, stopped walking near the edge of the forest, and still I felt watched. Sometimes I'd hear a faint rustle outside, the soft brush of something moving across the snow. Once, a shape passed behind the curtains, too tall for a deer, too still for a person. By the fifth night, I couldn't sleep. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Then I saw it again, that same deer, at the same spot. But this time, it wasn't alone. Dozens stood beside it. Their silhouettes stretched across the tree line, antlers rising like roots turned upside down. They didn't move. Not one. A ring of quiet shapes gathered around me. My lantern flickered. The shadows on the walls shifted, slowly, as if they were breathing. I opened the door. The cold hit me first, sharp and clean. Then the smell. Wet, fur, and something faintly sweet, like decay hiding under frost. They were closer now, close enough for me to see their breath, but the air didn't fog in front of them. It was only mine. I took one step forward. Snow whispered beneath my boots. They didn't react, not even the smallest twitch of an ear. I could feel their gaze, a weight pressing against my chest. Another step, then another. And that's when I saw it. Their faces. At first, I thought the snow had crusted over their fur, but as I came nearer, I realized it wasn't snow. It was smooth, flat, like the surface of polished bone. Where their eyes should have been, there was nothing. Where their mouths should have opened, there was only skin. Blank. A single one stood closest to me, its head tilted slightly as though curious. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. The stillness around me was absolute, like the forest had stopped breathing. Then all at once the circle shifted. Not a sound, not a hoofstep, just the faint slide of snow beneath invisible movement. They turned, in perfect unison, every one of them, facing deeper into the trees. And then they were gone. The space where they'd stood was empty. Only the wind and the faint trace of warmth where their bodies should have been. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blank face again, smooth, pale, and waiting. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, that I'd imagined it in the half-light. But a week later, when the snow began to melt, I found something by the edge of the woods. Hoof prints, deep ones, pressed into the soft earth in a perfect ring around my cabin. And in the center of that ring, beneath the thawing mud, I saw something small and white, a shard of bone, shaped like part of a face. I buried it where I stood, didn't look back. But even now, when night settles in, I sometimes feel that same silence gather outside. That wait, that watching. And somewhere beyond the pines, something still stands there, waiting for me to step out again. Because I think it knows me now, and I think it's learned how to wear a face. It was early autumn. The air was crisp, and the woods smelled like wet leaves and smoke. I walked farther than usual that evening, following a narrow trail behind the cabin. The path wound between trees that leaned toward each other, their branches brushing like whispers. And that's when I saw it. A clearing, a single oak tree standing. In the center, tall, scarred, its bark rough and pale where lightning must have split it long ago. From one of its limbs hung a rope swing, old, frayed. The wooden seat weathered smooth, like it had been used for years and forgotten. It swayed, slowly, back and forth. There was no wind. The forest was still, so still it pressed against my ears. But the rope creaked, each movement a soft groan that echoed through the clearing. I don't know why I felt drawn to it. Maybe it was the smell of the wood, or the way the light caught the seat, like something waiting to be remembered. It looked almost peaceful, like something from before the world turned quiet. I stepped closer. The leaves crunched under my boots, dry and thin like old paper. The swing moved again, a little harder this time. The rope twisted slightly, then settled, as if someone had just jumped off. I reached out. My hand brushed the seat, warm, not sun-warmed, not the kind of warmth that lingers from the day. It felt recent, like the heat of a body still there, just invisible. I pulled my hand back. The air around me had changed, thicker, somehow like I was standing too close to a breath I couldn't see. The swing moved once more. The creak louder now. The rope stretched, the wood dipped, like weight pressing down. And then it stopped. Completely still. No sound. Only the soft hum of silence that fills your head when everything else dies away. I looked at the ground beneath it. The dirt was dark, packed flat, a shallow dip, as if someone had landed there over and over again. There were no footprints, only dense, rounded shapes, too deep for fallen branches, too light for stones, almost like the mark of bare feet. I crouched down, ran my fingers through the earth. Cold, damp. But beneath the top layer it was warm, too, like the ground remembered. The swing began to move again, slow, unsteady, then faster. It rocked higher and higher, as if caught in invisible hands. The creaking grew louder, a rhythm too steady to be random. Back and forth, back and forth. Each swing ending with a faint thud, a whisper of impact against the dirt. I backed away. My breath felt sharp in my throat. The air trembled. A faint, Static buzzed in my ears like when a storm builds somewhere far away. I whispered, "Stop." It didn't. The swing climbed higher. The rope twisted, tightening on itself until it groaned. I thought it would snap, but it didn't. It just slowed. Once, twice, then froze, hanging perfectly still in the air. A small gust brushed the back of my neck. Warm again. Too warm for the evening chill. It felt like breath. Something brushed past my arm. A quick, light touch, gone before I turned. The clearing was empty. The trees stood quiet, watching. And then, the rope began to turn, slowly as if being twisted by unseen fingers. It wound tighter, the fibers groaning, until it faced the woods behind me, and stopped. The silence pressed in again, thick, unmoving. I didn't want to look, but I did. Between the trees, something shifted, a pale shimmer like light through smoke. It flickered once, then was gone. I ran. Branches scraped my coat. Leaves tore beneath my feet. But even as I stumbled through the dark, I could still hear it. That creak, slow, measured. The rope swinging again, far behind me, but following somehow. That night, I locked every door, closed every curtain, but sleep wouldn't come. Just before dawn, the wind picked up outside. It brushed the cabin's walls, soft, steady. And through the thin glass, I heard it again. The same rhythm. Creak, pause, creak, pause. I looked out the window. In the half-light, the trees swayed. The fog hung low, and there, just at the edge of the clearing, something moved. Not a person, not an animal. Just the faint rise of the swing, rocking gently on its own, and beneath it, in the soft earth, a new set of dents had formed. Smaller this time. Fresh. I don't go near that clearing anymore. But sometimes, when the wind is still, I swear I hear the creak again. Distant, patient, and waiting for someone new to push. It was late summer. The air was thick, sweet with pine and damp moss. I used to walk the forest trail every night after sunset, just to listen, just to breathe. There's a pond about half a mile in, hidden behind a tangle of roots and tall reeds. Locals call it the mirror pond, because when the air is still, the surface reflects the stars so perfectly, you can't tell where the sky ends. That night, the forest was quiet, not silent, but hushed in a way that made each step feel heavy. The hum of crickets, the faint rustle of something small in the underbrush, all of it distant, careful. When I reached the pond, the water looked like glass, a dark, endless sheet, reflecting the moon, the branches, and me. I always liked that part, seeing myself surrounded by stars like I was somewhere else, somewhere weightless. I crouched near the edge, knees brushing the cold grass. The surface didn't ripple, not even when I exhaled. It felt wrong for something that alive to be that still. I leaned closer. My reflection stared back, pale, eyes hollowed by the moonlight, expressionless. For a moment, I thought it looked tired, like me. The same soft frown, the same slouched shoulders, but then something shifted. It was subtle at first. A twitch at the corner of the mouth, barely there. Then again, a small pull upward. A smile. I didn't move, but the reflection did. It grinned. Wide. Too wide. My heart slowed. Not racing, just heavy like it was remembering something. The air around me grew colder. No wind, just that pressure you feel before a storm, pushing against your skin. I tried to back away, but I couldn't. My legs felt buried. Like the mud beneath me had hardened. The reflection tilted its head. Slowly. Curiously. Then it raised a hand. Its fingers touched the inside of the water. Not through it, beneath it. As if the pond was glass and it lived on the other side. My breath hitched. I wanted to move. I didn't. The reflection pressed its palm flat against the surface. I could see every finger, every crease in its skin, my skin, distorted by the rippling edge. Then came a sound, a soft tap, from underneath. I froze. Another tap. Closer this time. The surface trembled but didn't break. Tiny rings spread outward, reaching the shore, lapping at my boots. Then silence again. The reflection's smile faded. It stared up at me, eyes wide, expression hollow. I reached out, barely realizing I was doing it. My hand hovered above the surface, a breath away from touching it. And then it moved first. It reached up, faster than I could react. Its palm hit the other side of the water, directly beneath mine. Perfectly aligned. The cold spread instantly, through the air, through my arm, through something deeper. It felt like I was being watched. Not from the water, but from behind me. I turned. Nothing. Only trees. Only fog. When I looked back, the reflection wasn't smiling anymore. It looked afraid. Its lips moved. Just once. I couldn't hear what it said, but the water began to shake. Soft at first. Then violent. The stars above shattered in the reflection, bending into streaks of light. The trees melted into shadow. And in the center, the face, my face, started to change. The skin darkened, like ink spreading under glass. The eyes turned hollow, pale rings in the dark. The mouth opened, and bubbles rose from underneath, breaking the perfect surface. I stumbled back. The air was buzzing now. A low hum like static inside my skull, and then it stopped. Completely. The pond went still again. Smooth. Empty. Only the reflection of the stars stared back. Except mine wasn't there anymore. I should have seen my shape against the sky, my outline in the water. But there was nothing, just the pond, and its mirror sky. I walked backward, slow, careful not to make a sound. Every step felt heavier, like the ground was trying to hold me in place. When I reached the trees, I finally turned and froze. The water moved again, just slightly. Something beneath the surface had leaned forward, close enough that I could see its face clearly. It looked exactly like me. But the eyes, they were wrong. They followed me as I left. Head tilted, smiling again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the forest until morning, and just before the sun came up, I thought I saw it again. A faint shimmer through the trees. Like moonlight on water, a soft tap echoed from somewhere outside. I checked the door, the windows. Everything locked, but on the glass pane beside my bed, there was a wet handprint, fingers spread wide, palm pressed flat as if something had come up from beneath and wanted me to know the reflection had found a way out. It started as a small thing, a sound I thought was mine. Autumn had just begun. The nights came quicker, and the forest path behind my cabin was covered in a thin blanket of damp leaves. I liked walking there after dark. The air was cold enough to sting, and the world felt quiet, emptied of everything but me and the trees. That night, the moon hung low, a pale curve behind drifting clouds. I remember the way the ground softened under my boots, the faint smell of wet bark and fading pine. Then, a step behind me. It matched mine perfectly. I took one forward and another followed. Barely half a second later, I stopped. Silence. I waited, breath held, watching mist curl from my lips. Nothing, just the whisper of the trees and the slow creak of branches stretching overhead. I told myself it was echo. Maybe the forest throwing my steps back at me. I'd heard it before, in valleys or near water. It made sense then, but the next night it happened again. Same trail, same hour, same rhythm, one step. Then another behind mine, always close, always the same. I tried to ignore it until it began to match me too perfectly. When I slowed, it slowed. When I paused, it stopped. It wasn't echo, it was following. I remember testing it once, a small game against the dark. I lifted my foot and waited longer before setting it down. There was a pause and then another soft crunch, mimicking. It felt aware. I turned. Nothing there. Only fog weaving between the trees. I told myself I was imagining it. That maybe I wanted something to follow. Because being alone for too long can make even silence sound like company. But that night, it changed. I was halfway home when the footsteps didn't stop. I froze. The air did too. Even the leaves seemed to hang mid-fall. One more step. Behind me. Slow. Careful. My breath caught. Every muscle in me wanted to run. But I couldn't. It wasn't fear. It was something colder. Like my body understood something my mind didn't. The steps came again. Closer this time. Each one heavy enough to press into the wet earth. Soft enough to sound almost human. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. They stopped right behind me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It listened. I could hear the faint hum of the air between us, the way the fog curled against my skin, cold on my neck. Then, a breath. Warm. Slow. Sliding down the back of my ear. It lingered there. Close enough that I felt the dampness of it, like someone had leaned in just to see if I'd react. I didn't. Couldn't. Something brushed the edge of my hair. Gentle, like a hand testing the air. I swallowed. The sound was too loud, too sharp in the quiet, and then it exhaled again. Longer this time, almost trembling. I stepped forward. Another step followed, right behind mine. The rhythm was wrong now, uneven, breathing between each footfall. I walked faster. So did it. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, hiding the ground. All I could hear was that steady pursuit, not rushed, not frantic. Just close. Every time I turned, there was only the dark. No movement. No figure. But when I faced forward again, I could feel it, like a pulse pressed against my spine. The last stretch before my cabin felt endless. The path sloped upward, roots twisting beneath my feet. And still, it followed, until I reached the clearing. The moment my boots hit open ground, the sound stopped. Completely. The air went thin. My ears rang. I turned one last time. Nothing. Only trees fading into the mist. I stood there watching, waiting for it to move again, but the forest was still. Too still. I made it inside, locked the door, and leaned against it until my breathing evened. Then I heard it. One step, right outside, and another, soft, deliberate. They stopped by the window. I didn't look. Couldn't. I just listened. For a while there was nothing. Then the faintest scrape, like fingers brushing the glass. And then, that same slow breath. Right on the other side, I waited for it to end. Waited until dawn lit the trees outside. When I finally looked, there were footprints in the mud, mine. And one more set, just behind every step I'd taken, except for the last one. That one stopped right outside my door, and when I leaned close to the window, I saw something faint on the glass, a print, smudged, almost invisible in the morning light, the outline of a hand. Pressed flat against the pane, the fingers were long. Too long, and they were facing inward. It stood in the clearing like a bone from another world. Tall, cracked, swallowed by ivy and silence. The bell tower. I hadn't meant to find it. I'd only followed a trail the rain had carved between the trees. The forest smelled of wet soil and cold stone, a hush that pressed against my skin. The tower rose out of the fog, its walls crumbling, its doorway dark and half collapsed. I thought, at first it was abandoned. It had to be. No one builds something like that here anymore. No roads lead to it, no maps mention it, and yet the air around it felt watched, like something had been waiting. I walked closer. My boots sank into moss, each step sinking into the quiet. The door hung open. Wood splintered, hinges streaked with rust. Inside, the air was colder, still. It smelled faintly of iron, and something older, dust that had never moved. A spiral staircase wound up along the wall, each step eaten away by time. Through a narrow window, the last light of dusk bled in, turning the stones pale and hollow. I don't know why I stayed. Something about the place felt like it was listening. The forest outside had gone dark by the time I noticed the bell. It hung far above, a shadow in the ceiling, so rusted it seemed part of the rock, It couldn't ring. It shouldn't. And yet, when the first toll came, I felt it before I heard it. A vibration under my feet. A pulse through the air. Then the sound rolled down, low and heavy, shaking dust from the walls. It echoed through the trees outside, through the fog, through me. I froze. Counted the seconds between each ring. 1. The forest trembled. 2. The light flickered, as if the moon itself had blinked. 3. The air pressed closer, thicker, colder. The bell was moving. I could see it now, swaying, slow and heavy, though no wind touched it. Each toll made the stones groan. I could feel them shift beneath my hand, grinding like old teeth. 4. 5. Somewhere far below, something began to stir, a faint rhythm. Not the bell, but underneath it, a second pulse, like footsteps. Deep and muffled, rising from within the tower. I stepped back, my breath misting in the dark. The stairs were empty. Only shadow, curling downward into black. The bell tolled again. 6. The air shook. Dust drifted from the ceiling. And for a moment, I thought I saw movement below. A flicker between the stones. Like the outline of a figure. The 7th toll came, and the footsteps grew louder, slow, measured, one after another, climbing up the spiral. The sound wasn't right. Too heavy to belong to one person, too steady to belong to more. It felt old, as if the stones themselves were walking. I backed toward the doorway, but the night outside had changed. The forest swayed, trees shivering in rhythm with the bell. Each toll rippled through the ground, sending small waves through the puddles near my feet. 8. 9. The bell's voice was cracking now, grinding against its own rust. It wailed instead of rang. 10. The footsteps reached halfway up. I could hear the faint rasp of fingers brushing the stone. Slow, deliberate, dragging. 11. I turned to run. The air outside felt too thick to breathe. Fog had risen higher, curling through the doorway, slinking across the floor. 12. The final toll, the bell stopped. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the sound shifted. From above to below, the footsteps were descending now. I heard them turn. Start downward, each one heavier than before. The sound wasn't far. Maybe just behind the wall, moving with impossible weight. My heart stumbled. The air smelled of stone dust and cold metal. Something scraped the inside of the door frame. Soft at first, then firmer. A slow, deliberate drag. I stepped back. The fog near my feet rippled, as if something had just brushed through it. And then, silence, the kind that hums inside your ears too deep to be empty. I didn't move, didn't blink, but from the shadows behind the door I felt it. A breath. Not warm, not cold. Just there, like the tower itself was exhaling. I turned and ran into the trees. Branches clawed at my arms. Roots caught at my boots. The forest twisted around me, but I didn't stop. Not until the bell rang again, once, faint, from far away. The echo drifted through the fog, soft and slow, like it was searching. When I looked back, the tower was gone. Only mist and moonlight, and the faint tremor in the ground, as if something below was still walking, still descending, still waiting for the next midnight. The forest was quieter that evening. Even the wind seemed to hesitate between the trees. Damp leaves clung to my boots, and the air smelled of wet bark and something faintly sweet, like rotting sap. I was walking a trail I hadn't seen before. Narrow, uneven, lined with old birch trees that leaned too close, as if listening. That's when I saw it. A fallen trunk, thick and hollow, split clean through the middle. The wood inside was dark, almost black, as if the years had burned it from within. It stretched across the path like a bridge, one end swallowed by ferns, the other sinking into a bed of mud and moss. Something about it felt strange. The stillness around it. Too deliberate, no insects, no movement, just the faint hum of my breath. I crouched down. The opening was just wide enough to peer into. It smelled cold, like wet earth and old rain. At first it was only darkness, a tunnel of shadows running through the center of the log. The other end was a faint circle of gray light. But then something blinked, just once. Deep inside, two small points of light, pale yellow, reflecting like glass. I froze. My mind searched for something ordinary, a raccoon maybe, or a fox. But they didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't shift with my whisper of breath. Just blinked, slowly, watching me. The air around me thickened. The damp smell grew stronger, a mix of mold and something animal. Wet fur maybe, but sharper. I leaned closer. The ground was cold beneath my knees, the moss slick against my hands. The eyes stayed there. Perfectly still, perfectly quiet. I swallowed. My reflection flickered faintly in them. Then another pair appeared just beside the first, blinking in perfect rhythm, and then another. Higher up, 3 pairs, 6 eyes, all staring back through the hollow. I took a slow breath, trying not to move too suddenly. The inside of the log seemed to shift, as if something within it had just adjusted. A slow, wet movement. Like fabric dragging through mud, the air changed, heavier, closer. I whispered, "Hello?" The moment the word left my mouth, the eyes blinked, not together, but one after another, in a ripple, like they were answering. More lights appeared, farther back in the tunnel. 4, 5, then too many to count, tiny reflections crowding against one another, all facing the same direction. The hollow log was full of them, pressed close, packed tight, every blink out of sync. Like dozens of small, living pulses, the shadows behind them moved slowly, as if breathing. Something wet dripped from the opening, thick, like sap, but darker. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loud it filled the silence. The eyes followed, every single one, turning slightly as I moved. The faint ring of yellow light traced my motion, blinking, fluttering. I thought I heard something. Not quite a whisper, more like a hum. A low vibration inside the wood, like they were speaking beneath the bark. The forest felt smaller suddenly. The air heavier. I wanted to run, but I couldn't look away. The log's hollow seemed deeper now, endless, like it wasn't part of the forest at all, but something underneath it. Then, the first pair began to move, closer, slow, sliding toward the opening. The others followed, a shifting mass of tiny lights crowding forward. The wood creaked softly, strained. I stepped back again. My boot snapped a twig, and every single eye froze. No blinking, no movement, just still, staring. The hum stopped. All that remained was the faint trickle of that dark sap sliding down the side of the log. It touched the ground, hissed against the cold earth, and then a sound, a single sharp inhale. From inside, not mine. I ran, branches whipped across my arms. The forest blurred into streaks of gray, but I could still feel them. Behind me. Not chasing, just watching. Even as I broke through the tree line, even when the clearing opened up again, the feeling didn't fade, like eyes pressed against the back of my skull, refusing to blink. I looked once over my shoulder. The path was empty, still. But in the distance, where the log lay hidden beneath the trees, a faint light pulsed, soft, yellow, like something breathing in the dark. I don't walk that trail anymore. But some nights when the forest goes quiet, I swear I can still see them. Tiny reflections just beyond the tree line, waiting for me to kneel again. You said it began on a windless night. The kind where the air feels too still, too heavy to breathe. The trees didn't sway. The leaves didn't rustle. Only the faint hum of crickets lingered at the edge of the clearing behind my cabin. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft. Far away. Singing. It drifted through the trees like smoke. Thin and pale, curling through the silence. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The melody was slow, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. A lullaby. Something I'd heard once before. Maybe as a child. Maybe in a dream. The voice was beautiful. Fragile but steady, like it had been singing for a very long time. The words blurred together, half whispered, half hummed. I couldn't make them out, but I felt them, gentle at first. Then, wrong. There was something off about the rhythm. Too slow, too measured. Like the voice was keeping time with my heartbeat. I stepped out onto the porch. The night was pale with fog. It hung low just above the grass, rolling softly between the trees. The singing grew clearer, closer. My skin prickled. I whispered into the dark. "Hello?" The voice didn't stop. It only changed. A small tremor, as if whoever was singing had heard me. The tone grew brighter, sweeter, inviting. I should have gone back inside. But curiosity is heavier than fear when it sounds like someone you almost remember. I followed. Each step through the clearing sank into the wet earth. The smell of moss and pine thick in the air. The melody wound through the trees, fading, then returning, like it was leading me somewhere. And then I saw her, at the edge of the clearing, a woman, standing where the fog met the trees. She was facing away from me. Her hair long, dark, hanging loose over a pale dress that touched the grass. Her body swayed gently, side to side as she sang. The lullaby floated between us, soft and slow. Something about the way she moved made my stomach tighten. Too even. Too careful. The air around her shimmered slightly, like heat over asphalt. I stopped a few feet away. The world felt thinner there. Like I'd stepped into something hollow. "Are you okay?" The words felt too loud, even whispered. She didn't answer, but the singing grew quieter, slower. Then she turned her head. Not fully. Just enough that I saw her cheek. Her mouth still moving, but the words, they weren't words anymore. Just a sound drawn out, shaking softly. The tune unraveled, warped, like a record slowing to a stop. My breath caught. Something about her jaw, the way it moved. Too far, too loose. Her head tilted more and the mouth kept opening. The song wavered into a low hum, then cracked. Her jaw slid wider, a thin pop, like wood splitting, and wider. The sound changed, the melody breaking apart into dry gasps that almost sounded like crying. I took a step back. Her face turned fully toward me. Her eyes, they were open, but unfocused, the pupils wide and trembling, and her mouth, it wasn't a mouth anymore. It was a black shape stretched almost to her throat, still singing, still swaying. The lullaby rose again, but now it scraped, crackled, a sound that shouldn't come from a throat. Too deep, too many voices beneath it. I stumbled backward. The fog curled around my legs, cold as hands. The air trembled with the note she held. It vibrated through the trees, through my chest, through my teeth. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The song was pressing against me, a weight, thick, living. And then it stopped. All at once, her jaw hung open, silent. She stood there, frozen, still swaying. The forest held its breath, and slowly, she began to close her mouth, bone grinding softly back into place. A faint smile spread across her face, her head tilted. And I swear, for just a second, I heard her whisper my name, the same voice as the lullaby, and then she stepped backward. Into the fog. The white swallowed her whole. I ran. I didn't stop until I was inside, door locked. Lights flickering from the strain of my heartbeat. But even then, I could still hear her, soft, humming, right outside the window. The same tune. The same rhythm. A song I almost remember, and when I pressed my hand against the glass, it vibrated faintly to the sound of her voice, still singing, still waiting. It was late afternoon when I found it. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears thick, like the world is holding its breath. The air smelled different that day, heavy, dry, like rain had come and gone without falling. Then I saw the trail. It wound through the trees, pale and gray, a thin path dusted in fine ash. At first, I thought it was mist clinging to the ground, but when I knelt closer, the smell hit me, burnt, sharp, and bitter. Like something had been on fire for a very long time. The ash was soft under my fingers, warm even in the shade. But when I stepped onto it, it didn't move. No footprint, no trace, just stillness. I stood there for a while, watching the trail stretch deeper into the woods. Something about it pulled at me. A quiet pull, like gravity, like memory. I followed. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. The light dimmed, even though the sun was still high. The air felt thinner, as if the trees were drawing the breath out of it. The smell of smoke grew stronger. Dry, sweet, almost metallic. It coated my throat, clung to the inside of my nose. Every few steps, I brushed against a branch and watched a thin layer of ash fall from it, as if the forest had been dusted in gray snow, but there were no signs of burning. No scorched bark, no blackened leaves, just that fine, perfect ash. I told myself to turn back, but the path was narrow, clean, like it had been waiting to be walked, and somewhere ahead, I could feel a change. The trees began to thin. The air grew colder. And then, silence. Even the insects had stopped. When I stepped out of the tree line, I found it. A clearing. Round. Empty. The ground was completely black. No grass. No roots. Just scorched earth that cracked softly beneath my shoes. The trees at the edge were nothing but stumps. Brittle. Crumbled. As if a fire had eaten them and left them to remember. In the middle of it all, a single chair, wooden, old, standing upright in the ashes. The air shimmered faintly above it, like heat rising from pavement. I moved closer, slowly. The ash thickened around my legs, dragging at my steps. I could feel warmth seeping up through my shoes. The chair looked untouched. No burns, no soot. Just a faint amber sheen, like it had been polished recently. I reached out my hand and stopped. The air around it was warmer. Alive somehow, I could almost hear it. Not sound exactly, but a hum. A low vibration just beneath hearing. My chest tightened. It felt like standing beside something that shouldn't exist. Something pretending to be ordinary, I whispered. "Is anyone here?" My voice fell flat. Swallowed by the open space, I tried again. But before the word left my mouth, the warmth changed. It grew stronger. Radiating outward from the chair, a single puff of gray ash lifted from the seat, drifting upward, curling in the still air, and underneath it, a mark, a faint outline. Two shapes pressed into the wood, side by side, as if someone had just been sitting there. The air trembled. The hum grew deeper, and I took a step back, then another. Behind me, the trail was gone. The line of ash had vanished. Only the clearing remained, stretching wider than before. My chest felt tight. The smoke taste thick in my throat. I could feel it watching me. The chair, the heat, the space around it pulsing with something slow and deliberate, like breath. I turned to run, but before I moved, I saw it. A faint ripple in the air above the chair. The shape of shoulders. A head, almost invisible. Someone sitting there, just barely out of sight. The ash around its feet stirred. And the warmth reached me again, hotter now, closer. I stepped back until I reached the edge of the clearing. My heart was pounding so loud it made my ribs ache. I didn't look again. I just ran. The air grew colder as I moved, the trees pressing close. The trail of ash gone completely. When I finally reached the cabin, I didn't light a fire, I didn't even turn on the lamp. The smell of smoke still clung to me, settled in my hair, in my clothes, and even now, when the night is quiet, I can still taste it. That faint, burned sweetness. Sometimes, when I wake in the dark, I feel a soft heat spreading through the floorboards beneath my bed. And once, just once. I thought I heard the faint scrape of wood against the ground, like a chair being pulled a little closer. It was late October. The air had that still, empty cold that comes before frost. Everything smelled like damp bark and slow decay. I was walking the forest trail behind my cabin, just to clear my head. The moon was full that night. Too bright. The kind of light that makes everything look sharp. Too real. It slipped through the branches in thin silver stripes. Each beam cut across the ground, drawing long shadows that swayed gently with the wind. I remember watching them move. The way they stretched and breathed across the dirt, like the forest itself was alive. It felt peaceful at first, until I noticed one of them didn't move, a thick shadow near my feet. Long and still, stretching across the trail, I looked up. There was no branch above me, no tree, nothing that could cast it. I took a step to the side. The shadow didn't. It stayed where it was, angled slightly toward me. For a moment I thought I imagined it. But when I stepped back, it followed, not instantly, just delayed, like it was remembering what I'd done and choosing to match it. My breath came out in a pale cloud. The forest was too quiet. I turned, scanning the trees. Their shadows all swayed in rhythm, like a single breath passing through them. But that one, it stood still. The shape was wrong, too. Not like a branch or trunk, more like a person leaning forward, reaching. I rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was closer, just a few inches nearer, as if the ground itself had tilted it toward me. The dirt under my boots felt soft. Too soft. When I shifted my weight, it sounded like a whisper, a dry rustle. I started walking faster. My eyes stayed fixed on the ground, watching the shadows slide beneath my steps. They all flowed and changed with me, bending in the moonlight, except that one. It followed, matching my pace. When I stopped, it stopped. When I turned, it leaned, its shape stretching longer across the path. I could feel it now, the cold, the way it pressed through the air like static. My pulse was steady at first, then not. Something in me said, don't run, don't make it chase. So I walked, carefully. The trees thinned out ahead. The clearing was close. The grass there was pale, silver under the moon, but the ground behind me darkened. The shadow? No, the shadows had multiplied. There were more now. Shapes sliding along the dirt, stretching from trunks that weren't there. Each one angled toward me. They didn't sway like the others. Didn't flicker with the wind. They moved with me, one step, then another. They followed in silence, pulling longer. Curling toward my legs, I broke into a run. The ground blurred. The forest spun, and I could hear them. Not footsteps. Not breathing, but movement. A soft, dragging sound, like cloth being pulled through leaves. I didn't look back. When I reached the clearing, the moonlight hit me full in the face, blinding, cold. I stopped, trying to catch my breath. The shadows should have vanished here. No trees overhead, just open sky. But when I looked down, they were still there. Dozens of them. Long black smears spreading out across the grass, and mine, somehow, was missing. The air grew heavy, thick enough to feel in my throat. I turned in a slow circle. The shadows had formed a ring around me. None of them belonged to anything. No branches, no rocks, no people. Just empty air where their owners should have been. Then, one moved. It rippled across the ground. Smooth and slow like liquid night. Another followed, and another. They slid closer, circling tighter, the edges of their forms breaking apart like smoke. I tried to step back, but there was nowhere left to go. The cold pressed in from all sides. The ground trembled beneath my shoes, and in the corner of my eye, one of the shadows lifted. It peeled off the ground, just slightly, like skin separating from flesh. Something underneath it shimmered. Thin and wet, almost human. The edges reached toward my feet. I stumbled backward, tripped on a root and fell hard into the dirt. When I blinked, they were gone. Just the ordinary forest again. The wind, the branches, My own breath shaking in the quiet. I stood slowly. Looked down, my shadow had returned. But it was wrong. It faced me, its head tilted, mirroring me just a beat too late. I backed away, but it stayed where it was, still watching, and as I turned to leave, it moved. Not toward me this time, but alongside, following in perfect silence, step for step, until the trees swallowed the moonlight and the world went dark. Winter came early that year. The forest froze in silence, each branch stiff and glittering under pale light. I lived alone then, in a small cabin tucked between pines. It was quiet, safe, the kind of quiet that made you feel sealed away from the world. At night, I'd sit by the fire. The only sound was the soft crackle of wood and the low hum of wind pressing against the walls. The window beside my bed always frosted over after midnight. I'd wake and find it clouded with mist, a thin layer of fog that caught the moonlight like glass breath. It made sense. The air was cold. The cabin was warm. Condensation, I thought. Just science. Until the morning I saw the handprint, small, smudged against the glass right in the center. 5 fingers, spread wide. I stood there a long time watching the light crawl through the frost. It wasn't mine. It couldn't be. The mark was on the outside. I wiped it away, but the shape lingered faintly, like oil that refused to fade. That night, I locked the window, checked it twice. Still. When I woke, the glass was fogged again, and this time, there were 2 prints, side by side, smaller than before, like the hands of a child pressed there for balance. I didn't sleep much after that. The forest seemed to move differently in the dark, branches clicking together, snow shifting under invisible weight. I told myself it was just the cold, just the wind, but the next morning there were more, 4 handprints now. All different sizes, some small, some long, some pressed so hard the outline looked burned into the frost. The shape of the fingers, they were too thin, too long. I started covering the window with a blanket at night, but I could still hear it. That faint sound, a slow drag across the glass, like fingertips tracing lazy circles. Sometimes it would stop, then start again, right where my head rested on the other side of the wall. It felt like it was waiting for me to listen. Days passed in a blur of silence and unease. Each morning I'd pull the blanket down, hoping the glass would finally be clear. But the handprints kept coming. Larger, heavier. One morning, there was just one, massive, spread across nearly the entire pane. The fingers reached down to the sill. The palm was wide, pressed deep enough to leave faint cracks in the frost. I stood there until my breath fogged the inside, and for a moment I thought I saw movement beyond the glass. A pale shift, like someone leaning close, watching me back. I moved the bed to the other wall that day. Didn't matter. At night, I could feel it. The cold pressing through the boards, the faint creak of the frame, and once, the whisper of air moving beneath the window. I sat up, heart pounding slow and heavy. The room was black. The fire had gone out hours ago. I could see my breath in the dark, curling up and fading. And then, another cloud formed beside it, not mine. I froze. The fog spread thinly across the inside of the window. A patch of warmth, as if something was breathing from the other side of the glass. For a long moment, it just stayed there. 2 breaths, mine and something else. Then the fog cleared and I saw it, a hand. Pressed against the inside of the window, it didn't move, didn't fade, just stayed there, skin pale and gray in the moonlight. I couldn't breathe. The fingers flexed once, slowly, leaving streaks down the glass, and then it went still again. I backed away, step by step, until I hit the far wall. The room was silent except for the soft creak of wood and the faint hiss of wind outside. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I waited, minutes, maybe hours, watching that hand, half expecting it to slip away. It didn't. When the first light of dawn touched the trees, I finally moved closer. The window was clear, no fog, no frost, just a single oily print on the inside, larger than any I'd seen before. The fingers were splayed, as if reaching inward. I packed my things that morning. Didn't look back. Now, when the nights get cold, I still think about that cabin. And sometimes, in the quiet just before sleep, I feel the same chill brush the back of my neck, like breath against glass, waiting. The air was thin that morning. Pale light slipped through the trees, turning everything silver. The forest was quiet, like it was holding its breath. I'd walked this trail 100 times before, but that day something felt off. The path curved differently. The air carried a faint hum. Not wind, not insects, something steady, low. That's when I saw it. A small wooden marker, nailed into the side of a birch tree. It wasn't like the ones used by rangers. Older. The wood darkened. Edges softened by years of rain. A symbol carved into it. A circle with a line through the center. Simple, almost meaningless. But there was something strange about it. It looked fresh. I touched it. The groove was clean. The wood still raw beneath the outer bark. Someone had carved it recently. I looked around. No voices, no trails of smoke. Only silence. And the soft press of fog drifting between the trunks. A few steps ahead, another tree. Another marker. Different shape. A triangle this time, cut deep into the bark. And another, farther on. I followed them. The path was narrow, lined with roots that caught my boots. Each marker felt deliberate, spaced just far enough apart to make you want to find the next one. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. The usual forest sounds faded. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the faint hum that seemed to grow with each step. The symbols changed too, a curve, then an X, then something that looked like an eye. I didn't know why I kept walking. It felt like something unseen was guiding me forward, softly tugging me along the invisible thread of those carvings. Time began to blur. The light dimmed, even though it wasn't near evening. The air smelled different, not like pine anymore, but ash, wet earth, something faintly metallic. When I stopped to catch my breath, I realized I couldn't hear anything at all, not even my own footsteps. It was like the world had gone mute. And then, a final tree. The last marker. It was carved deeper than the others, darkened by something that looked like sap, but thicker, almost black. The symbol was different from the rest. An open circle, broken through one side like a door. I reached out and traced it with my finger. The wood pulsed faintly beneath my touch, like something alive beneath the bark. I pulled back. That's when I noticed. The trees had changed. No leaves. No moss. Just pale trunks stretching into the fog, their surfaces scarred by the same strange symbols. Hundreds of them, repeated again and again like the forest itself had been rewritten. I turned around to go back, but the path was gone. No footprints, no trail, only fog and those marks staring from every direction. I started walking anyway. The hum followed, always just behind me. It wasn't until I saw the clearing that I began to recognize where I was. A slope, a narrow path of dirt leading up between the trees. And there, in the distance, the shape of my cabin. The roofline cut through the mist like an old photograph, faded, familiar. Relief washed over me. But it didn't last long, because as I stepped closer, I saw something nailed into one of the trees beside the path. A trail marker, the same kind, the same dark wood, and beyond it, another, each one pointing straight toward my home. I slowed down, heart heavy in my chest. Every step forward revealed more of them, forming a perfect line leading to my front door. When I reached the porch, the air felt wrong again, dense, thick with something that didn't move, didn't breathe. I turned to look behind me. The forest was still, silent. And then I saw it. The last symbol. carved into the door itself, deep, sharp, fresh, the same open circle broken through one side. I ran my fingers along it. The wood was warm, like someone had just finished carving it. The hum was louder now, pressing through the boards beneath my feet. Inside, the cabin was dark, still, but something about it felt different, like every wall, every corner, every quiet space I'd known was watching. I sat there until the light faded from the windows. The fog crept closer, curling against the glass, and somewhere, deep in the stillness, I thought I heard it. The faint tapping of metal against wood, slow, measured, like someone carving, not in the forest this time, but from inside. It started near dusk. The forest was still, the kind of quiet that feels thick, like the world is holding its breath. I was walking the old path behind the cabin, the one that winds between the birch trees and fades into the moss. The air was cool. Wet leaves stuck to my boots. The ground felt soft, too soft, like something hollow just beneath. At first, I thought it was thunder, a faint vibration under my feet. Not enough to shake the earth, but enough to notice. A steady pulse, rising through the soles of my boots and into my bones. It stopped, then started again. A slow rhythm, like something moving. I crouched down, pressed my hand to the dirt. It wasn't thunder. The ground was breathing. Little tremors rolled beneath my palms, spreading out in waves, and somewhere below, a scrape. A faint dragging sound, distant but alive. I leaned closer, put my ear to the soil, and I heard it, something shifting beneath the surface. Not fast, not frantic, just steady movement, crawling, dragging, whispering. The earth was whispering. At first I thought it was air, or roots brushing against stone. But there were words, or something close to words. They came in short bursts, like breath caught in dirt. Too quiet to understand. Too wrong to forget. I stood up, heart hammering. The forest looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Every tree leaned inward. Every shadow seemed to wait. I took a few steps back, but the vibration followed, just under the ground, matching my pace. When I stopped, it stopped. When I ran, it ran faster. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had slipped behind the ridge, and the woods had gone dark. Only the faint hum of crickets and the whisper beneath the soil. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, too still. I lay in bed, listening to the wood creak as the cold set in. Then, it started again. A soft vibration rolling under the floorboards. Slow, crawling from one corner to the other. The walls trembled, barely enough to notice, just enough to make the water in the glass beside my bed ripple. I sat up. The sound was clearer now. Scraping, grinding, something heavy dragging itself through the dirt. It paused beneath the window, then kept moving, closer to the door. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. A bad dream, a trapped animal, but the pattern was too deliberate, too alive. It circled the cabin once, twice, each time slower than before. When it stopped, I could feel it right below me, breathing, waiting. I pressed my ear to the floor. The wood was cold. My breath fogged the boards, and from below, a whisper, muffled, distorted, but close. So close I could almost feel it against my skin. A voice, not one I knew. Low, broken, like air forced through wet soil. It said something I couldn't understand. A shape of sound, more feeling than language, but the tone, it was calling up. I stumbled back, heart pounding, hands shaking. Then, the vibration stopped. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. Thicker, heavier, like something was listening. I stayed awake until morning, too afraid to move. When light finally came through the window, the world looked normal again. No sign of digging, no loose dirt, no holes. But when I stepped outside, the ground felt different, softer, sunken, as if something had passed through it in the night. There were faint lines in the soil, long, uneven ridges stretching from the woods to the base of my cabin. and right beneath the porch, a small mound of disturbed earth. Something had surfaced there, or tried to. I stood still, listening. The forest was quiet again, but beneath the quiet, I could still feel it. A pulse. Slow. Deep. Moving further away. Back into the woods. I thought it was over. But that night, as the fog rolled in and the air turned cold, I felt it again. The faintest tremor beneath my feet. A scrape, a whisper, and then 3 knocks from below. Slow. Even. Measured. Then silence. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, listening to the floor breathe. And when I finally lay down, I could swear somewhere under the earth, something whispered my name. It was early autumn. The air had that still waiting chill that comes before rain. The forest behind my cabin was quiet. No birds, no wind, just the soft crunch of leaves under my boots. That's when I saw it. In a small clearing I'd never noticed before. An old grandfather clock. It stood alone, half buried in moss. Wood darkened by weather, its glass face clouded with dust. The pendulum hung still. The hands were frozen. At midnight. There was something strange about it. No path led there. No footprints but mine. And yet it didn't feel abandoned. It felt placed. I brushed the dirt from its base. The wood was dry, warm to the touch, as if it had been standing in sunlight. But there was no sun that day. Only gray sky, only silence. I leaned close. No ticking, no hum. Just stillness. For a while I stood there, staring. It looked too heavy to move, too large to have simply appeared. I left before dark. But I kept thinking about it. How out of place it had looked. Like time had stopped there. The next morning I walked the same trail again. The forest smelled of wet bark and cold air. When I reached the clearing, I froze. The clock was gone, not broken, not fallen, gone. I walked further, and found it, 20 feet closer to my cabin. Same shape, same wood, same frozen hands. Midnight. I stood there for a long time, trying to understand, trying to find marks, tracks, anything, but the ground was untouched. The moss beneath it perfectly smooth, like it had grown there for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind pressed softly against the windows. The trees groaned outside. And every few minutes I thought I heard a click, not loud, just barely enough to notice, like a second hand moving once, then stopping. I told myself it was the pipes, or my mind half dreaming. But the next morning, the clock had moved again. Now it stood at the edge of the clearing, only a few trees away from my back fence. Its face was clearer in the daylight. The glass clean now, the brass hands glinting faintly, still locked at 12. But the pendulum, it was swaying, slow, uneven, like something breathing behind the glass. I ran. The sound followed me. Soft ticks carried through the trees. Then silence again. That night I pushed a chair against my door, left the lights on. Every creak of the cabin made me flinch. The hours stretched. The night felt endless until somewhere around 3, I woke. It took me a moment to realize what had done it. A sound, steady, precise, tick, tick, tick. The noise came from somewhere inside, not loud but close. I turned on the lamp. The air looked heavy, full of pale dust, the kind that drifts when something has just moved. Tick. The sound came from the corner. I didn't want to look. I already knew. The clock stood there, inside my room, the same one. Same dark wood, same frozen hands, but now the pendulum was swinging smoothly, side to side. Each movement sharp, deliberate, tick, tick, tick. The hands stayed fixed at midnight, but the ticking didn't stop. I could feel the vibration in the floorboards, in my chest, in my breath. The air grew colder, and the glass face began to fog from the inside. I stepped closer, slowly, as if something might hear me. My reflection shifted on the glass, and for a moment I saw another one beside it, not mine, not moving the same way, a faint outline. A face blurred by condensation. It exhaled. The fog spread across the glass. And then, the hands moved. Both jumped forward, snapping to 1 minute past 12. The pendulum stopped. Silence swallowed the room. I didn't sleep after that. Didn't move until dawn. When the first light came through the window, the clock was gone. Only the faint shape of its base remained in the dust. And the air still smelled faintly of oil and metal. Outside, the forest was quiet again. But when I looked toward the tree line, I saw it. The clock, standing once more in the clearing, back where I first found it. Its hands frozen at a new time, 1 minute past midnight. I think it's waiting for the next night, for the next minute, for when the hands meet again,